Hello, in this video I'll go over for loops and how we use them in computer programming. First, let's have a quick look at this code. Now it seems like a lot of code, but don't be put off because we're just going to have a look at a small part of it, but I'll explain what's going on through the different parts of the code. This importing, I'll explain this in another video. But basically what I'm doing is I'm importing a file from somewhere else and then I'm calling on that functions that are in that file. This is a class. We've seen how to make classes in a previous video. This is the initializer magic method and it's defining the features of an object. We've done this in a previous video. This is just resetting the variables, nothing really too much to worry about right now. Now, this is the bit that I would really like to focus on. A for loop and what it does. Now, it basically allows you to iterate over a list. Now, what I mean by iterate, I mean it steps over every single item in that list. And then you can do things with that. So what we do is we use the keyword for. This here is a variable, and we declare this variable here, or we don't actually declare it, we just type it in. And then we use the keyword in. And what it's doing is it's saying for number in self.alist, run this piece of code. Self.alist is this list of integers and doubles here, this list of numbers. So it's going to step over each one of those lists and it's going to do a comparison here. If number, which will be the item in the list, so the first time it goes through the loop, the item or number rather will be 4. The second time it goes through the list, number will be 10. The third time it goes through the list, the number will be -2, and so on, right? So it's going to make a comparison, and if that number in the list is greater than 0, then it's going to add 1 to this variable here. Now this variable is in the constructor and it's set to 0. So it's going to take whatever it is and then add 1 to it. Here it's we have another variable, but this time this variable is a list, and this is initialized here, and it's going to append whatever that value is in number to that list. Next, we're going to print out some information. So we're going to print the total numbers in the list. This here will be placed into here, and this here I can't use the modulus D because this isn't a decimal. I know it's numbers, a list of numbers, but it's not a decimal, it's not a number, it's a list. So we use this comma here to separate it, and we're going to pop this in. I think we can actually use a comma there to pop that in as well. We can test that out. This code here that I've grayed out, that I've commented out, this is going to perform another function, and I'll show you what happens in a minute. But first of all, let's get started with this and see what happens. Now there's other bits of code down here, but I won't go into this now. So first, if I create an object, an instance of the class, and now if I call or send a message total positive, this is what happens. It takes this list and steps through it one by one, and it checks, and it's is 4 greater than 0? Yes. So it puts it adds 1 to here and appends it to this unsorted list here, which is this one. It then moves on to the next one and says, is 10 greater than 0? The answer is yes. So this one then becomes 2, and we add the 10 there. And it keeps on going through like this. So it doesn't notice it hasn't put the -2 in there because it's checked it, and it's not greater than 0. So it's going to miss it out. Next, let's have a look at the rest of this. Now, what I want to do is I want to rearrange these so that they are in ascending numerical order. Now I can do this by using a simple sort function called bubble sort. I'm not going to go too much into bubble sort right now. I'll do a playlist or some videos on sorting algorithms at a later date. But I want to use it because it has a for loop in it that we can have a look at. So if I and let's uncomment that. Now what it's going to do is it's going to take the values, and it's going to send it to bubble sort, which is in sort this. Sort this, we can see by the uppercase letter, is actually a class. And bubble sort is a method in that class, and we're going to pass it in this list, and then it's going to sort it for us. So if I do run, now when I run this, it's going to give us another line of code there. So you can see that it has sorted it. It has sorted it into numerical ascending order. So let's have a look at the bubble sort and see what's happened there. So the list was passed into here, and we have a for loop, and we have another for loop. Now this is called a nested for loop. So what happens is this runs, but every time this runs, this loop runs. So this is running this, and then it runs this one here as well. Now this for loop has in range, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about in range in a little while. So what I want to point out is that you can have a for loop within a for loop. It then runs this piece of code every time it runs through this list. And what it's doing with this list is it's starting at 0, starting at the end, ending at 0, and it's decreasing 1 each time. So let's go back to this loop here. Right. Now, if I undo this so that we can use it, and we're going to have a little look, a little comparison here. Notice maybe this is easier to see what's happening here. A little note to myself, right? Okay, so here, what's happening is this value is being sorted, and then it's being passed back. Because if we go back to the bubble sort, it says return a list. When it says return like that, it's going to return it to the function that called it. And here is where it called it. So it returns the sorted list, and then we can pop the sorted list in here. This, I've converted it to a string because it's going to be able to print it out that way. If I convert it to a string, it will print it out that way. If I don't convert it to a string, it won't print it out. But there might be a different way of doing this. So if I go and then do run, there, see, it does work. So that's two ways that you can do it. You can either use the comma or you can convert it to a string. If you convert it to a string, you have to use the plus sign. Down here, to try and make it a little bit easier to see what's happening there, I've given it a variable. So what happens is this bit of code is doing the same as this here, but what it's doing is it's placing it into this variable here. So in this variable now contains the sorted list, and then it's going to print it out, the sorted list, and this piece of code I don't need. So that is quite sort of complicated. Let's have a look at this again. If I do total negative, whoops. Now what it's done is this function has iterated over the list, and it's counted through the list. It's gone through the list and it's compared each item in the list, and then concluded that there's 6 of these items which are less than 0. The unsorted list is this one here, and then it's passed it to the bubble sort and turned it into a list of numerically ascending order. So in order to see what's going on, let's clear this. If I undo this and now I go through the step function, we start at the top. It might take its time to do this step. Now it's initializing the list, or it's at least registering that there's that function there. And it's stepping through and it's looking for a piece of code to run. And now it gets to here. Now this bit here is doing exactly the same as when we do this stuff over here when we're sending a message. So this is just sending a message to itself. It's creating the list now. And now it's gone to a total positive because that's what we sent the message to do. It's going to make sure that the lists are reset. Now it moves on to the for loop. Now if I look here, number now has the value 4, and 4 is the first item in that list. The list here is the list that I just showed you at the top. It's made the comparison. It's now added 1 to this list because it's keeping count of how many positives are in the list. And now it's gone back to the for loop and it's going to step over it again. But now when we look at number, the value in there is 10. And if we look at the list, the second number is 10. The third number is -2. So if I go through this, now it's gone through it a third time, so it should be -2 in there, and it is. And it will keep doing this until it's gone all the way through the list. You see how it's repeating this code? It's just examining every item that is in the list. So where are we up to? Right. Number 9. 9 is there, so we've got a few more steps to go until we've finished. It's appending each one of the numbers that fits the criteria to this list. So it did have 9 in there. It's got 5 in there. That's 5 was the next one. Now it's finished going through the list, and now it moves on to the next piece of code, and it's going to print this out. And there it is, it's printed out there, and now it moves on to this line of code, and it's going to print this out. This here is just the memory location. And it prints it out, and there we have the list. It then moves on to the sort. And now this is going to step through. So I current is 0. Now it's 1. And it steps through and steps through 2. This is because it's going through, it's not so much the values that are actually in the list, but actually the index number. But what I want you to see is how it's stepping over each item in the list, and it's going through this loop. It keeps running this loop until it gets to the end. Now, when it gets to return, it's going to return it back to here. So when we're looking here, it has returned a sorted list. So this one now is a sorted list. And then it prints it. And we've come to the end of that. In the next section, I'm going to have a look more into this in range part. To summarize, the main point of this video today is this for loop and iteration. So each time this for loop goes through this list, and this list here is, as I said before, this list here, see it is there. Each time it goes through that list, it will go through each individual number. For each individual item in that list, it will run this piece of code or whatever code that you have inside of the loop. So it goes through each individual item. So it goes through 4 and then plugs that into this variable and then runs this piece of code down here. It then goes to 10 and then runs this piece of code. So as you can see, it just goes through one individual item in the list until it gets all the way to the end, and then it stops. This video has gone on for longer than I expected. So in the next video, I will go over for loops and using the range keyword, and I will also go over nested for loops.
If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and try out one of my other videos.